Hi, my name is Abby Larimer, and I am counsel at Ford Harrison. I've been practicing employment law for about a decade now, and this past year was certainly like no other. This course will cover the various ways that COVID-19 has impacted employment law. We will also discuss changes in employment law that are likely to develop as the world continues to adjust to COVID-19 and the new normal. While COVID-19 has affected almost every part of day-to-day living in the US and abroad, the workplace will undoubtedly also be a different place due to the pandemic. It is important for attorneys who are assisting clients with issues related to COVID-19 to understand how the employment law landscape has changed due to COVID-19. Some of our learning objectives today will be to understand the legal developments in employment law related to COVID-19, to understand what employers can and cannot do when recalling employees back into the workplace, to discuss litigation trends related to employment law and COVID-19, to understand areas where legal developments are expected to occur related to the workplace, and understand current employment law as it relates to vaccines. Of course, for each of these topics, we could probably spend a full hour on each one, and there's so much that everyone knows that has happened in the past year. So we'll just try and cover at least, what are some of the most important trends, even at a high level, to give you a basic understanding about what we've been seeing in employment law and what we think we will continue to see. And also, like everything related to COVID-19, this is a constantly changing situation, with regulations and guidance coming out all the time. And so it's really important to always try and stay up to date and make sure that the information you have is the most recent. So on that note, I think we all remember when the pandemic first started and how it went in a very short amount of time from okay, are we going to be home for a week, to suddenly we're into this remote workforce. And I know I had calls, it went from just a few days from determining whether employees were still going to be going on to sales trips to suddenly dealing with employee furloughs and layoffs and pay cuts. So one initial area of the law that had an immediate impact due to COVID-19 had to do with the Federal WARN Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act. This is more commonly known as the Federal WARN Act. WARN generally requires large employers, those with 100 or more employees, to provide at least 60 days advance notice to employees before a plant closing or a mass layoff affecting more than 50 people at a single site of employment. So, of course, when COVID happened, a lot of businesses said, well, we have to lay everyone off, and we cannot provide the 60-day notice. So one of the first legal questions that employers had to deal with was whether COVID-19 triggered the natural disaster or unforeseeable business circumstance exceptions under WARN, which would permit employers from being exempted from the requirement of providing the normal notice that they would under federal WARN. And this still is a question that is working its way through the legal system over a year later. In one recent case out of Florida, Benson versus Enterprise Leasing Company of Florida, a court refused to dismiss a WARN class action that was related to the COVID-19 layoffs. Without evaluating any of the evidence and just looking at the allegations in the pleading, the judge said that the layoffs were not a direct result of COVID-19, but an indirect result, and thus the judge did not dismiss the class action. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what courts are going to determine, and we can expect that judges and courts are going to very carefully scrutinize layoff decisions that were made at the outset of COVID to see whether, depending on the real facts of each case, if employers did properly avoid liability under WARN due to COVID-19, or if they're not going to fit into any one of these limited business exceptions. So, this is just one of the many examples of employment law that was immediately impacted by COVID. And again, as everything continues to change, we know that employment laws will too. It's also likely that as litigation continues and cases continue to make their way through the court system, that there is going to be a bit of inconsistent guidance from judges while the post-COVID employment landscape gets sorted out. Now, we'll talk about some of the other areas of employment law that have been impacted by COVID-19 and what is currently happening and what we expect to see. And again, we'll just try and fit as much in here as possible.